At 14, I found myself standing in the middle of my grandmother's front yard, bags in hand, heart sinking. My parents had just driven away, not bothering to look back. They had dropped me off like a forgotten package, a mistake they no longer wanted. I had never imagined it would end like this, but here I was. Growing up, I always knew I was different. I had been diagnosed with epilepsy when I was young, and to make matters worse, by the time I turned 8, I was also diagnosed with dyslexia and severe ADHD. I didn't stand a chance. My parents, though well-intentioned, had never really known how to handle me. My brother, on the other hand, was the golden child, healthy, smart, easygoing. He was everything my parents wanted in a kid. And, of course, he got all their attention and love. I got nothing but frustration. When I was 6, I began to notice the differences in how my parents treated my brother and me. They treated him like a prize, while I was the burden. I couldn't blame them. I wasn't easy to deal with, but I needed their support, their love, their guidance. Instead, they made me feel like I was a disease they couldn't shake, a problem they didn't know how to fix. As I grew older, things got worse. My parents' frustration turned into resentment, and I could feel it in every moment. At home, it was like walking on eggshells. Every time I walked into a room, they stopped talking as if I had disrupted their perfect world. It didn't matter how hard I tried to fit in, I was never enough. The worst part wasn't my health problems. It was the way my parents made me feel about them. The way they treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't deserve to exist in their lives. By the time I hit my teenage years, I was lost. I had already become numb to the idea that my parents didn't love me. I started acting out, failing classes on purpose, cutting ties with my friends. I wanted attention, but they were too distant to notice. The more I pushed, the further they pulled away. When I was 14, things hit rock bottom. One day, I did something reckless at school, something I knew would finally get their attention. I brought a pack of cigarettes to class and lit one up right in front of my teacher. It was a cry for help, but all it earned me was expulsion. When my parents were called in, they didn't even bother to reprimand me. They just sighed in disappointment, as if they were tired of me. That day, my parents looked me in the eye and told me they regretted having me. They said if they knew what a disaster I would become, they would have terminated the pregnancy. They called me a burden on the family. That was it. They wanted me gone. For the next week, they locked me in my room, restricting me to the bare minimum bathroom breaks, food delivered, and nothing else. I felt like a prisoner. That was the moment I realized they didn't want me anymore. They had given up. And then, the unthinkable happened. After that week of isolation, they told me to pack up my things. My brother and mother packed for me while I waited in the car. When we drove to my grandmother's house, I thought maybe they just wanted me to stay there for a while. My grandma, strict but loving, always treated me better than my parents ever did. But no, this wasn't a visit. It was my new reality. They were leaving me with her. I was being abandoned, not temporarily, but permanently. My parents had given up on me, and I was now someone else's problem. I begged them not to leave me there. I was 14, lost and desperate. But they didn't even flinch. They told me that they were done with me, that they no longer wanted a freak like me in their lives. My heart shattered. They left me at my grandma's house, and with that, I realized I had no place left in the world I once called home. Grandma wasn't prepared to take me in. She was elderly and had already seen the toll my behavior had taken on my parents, but she took me in anyway, reluctantly. It was clear to me she didn't want me either, but she was my only option now. I was broken, but I wasn't going to give up. My parents had pushed me to the edge, and now I was going to rebuild my life. I had to. My survival depended on it. The first few days at Grandma's were unbearable. I kept waiting for someone to come back, for my parents to realize their mistake, for them to come to their senses and tell me they were just trying to scare me. But no one came. It was just me and my grandmother, and I couldn't help but feel like an intruder in her world. Grandma was sweet, but she was old. She had already raised a family, and she didn't have the energy to raise a troubled teenager. I could see it in her eyes, the concern, the doubt, the unspoken question of whether she could handle this. I wasn't an easy kid to manage, and I knew it. My epilepsy made me unpredictable, my ADHD made me restless, and my dyslexia made learning feel like climbing a mountain every day. I had so many issues stacked on top of each other, and now I was dumping them all on her. But she never said it outright. Instead, Grandma gave me the space I needed, and despite everything, I felt like she was the only one who truly cared. She was different from my parents. She didn't treat me like a problem. She treated me like a person. Grandma didn't have much, but she made sure I had everything I needed. I was embarrassed at first to ask her for help. She lived on a fixed income, and we had to pinch pennies, but she never once made me feel like a burden. Instead, she found ways to support me. She took me to the local library, hoping I could find something that would help with my schoolwork. She took me to the park when I was feeling restless, though her arthritis made it difficult for her to keep up. But the real change came when she sat me down one evening, after I'd spent a long day sulking around the house, trying to figure out where I belonged in this new life. "Listen, kiddo," she said softly, with a smile that reached her tired eyes. "I'm not going to pretend I know what you've been through. Your parents, well, they've made their choices. But you're here now, and I'm not giving up on you." It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd heard in years. It was a lifeline. For the first time in forever, someone had given me a chance. A real chance. Not just out of duty, but because they actually believed I could be better. I didn't know how, but I knew that I couldn't waste it. Over the next few months, I started to change. Slowly, painfully, but surely. It wasn't easy, nothing ever is, but I was tired of being angry. I was tired of wallowing in resentment. Grandma's simple belief in me, in the face of everything, pushed me to start believing in myself too. She didn't let me off easy. She pushed me to work on my schoolwork, even though I struggled, even though I hated it. She made me stick to a routine, even when I didn't feel like it. But through it all, she never made me feel like I was a mistake. In fact, my grades started improving. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was progress. Little by little, I began to find my rhythm, even though I was far from normal. I wasn't the perfect student, but I was doing better than I ever had. Grandma found a private tutor to help with my dyslexia, and while I still struggled with ADHD, I was learning how to focus for longer stretches of time. It wasn't just about schoolwork. Grandma also taught me things about life. Simple things like cooking a meal, taking care of the house, being responsible for myself. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was enough. She helped me realize that I didn't have to be perfect, just that I had to keep moving forward. But even as I started making strides in my personal growth, a shadow loomed over me: my parents. They weren't completely out of my life. They still called occasionally, mostly to check in on my brother. I'd hear about his achievements, his perfect life, how he was doing well at school, how he was excelling in his social life. And then there was the guilt. Every time I heard about how well my brother was doing, I felt like I was failing. They were constantly talking about him as though he was the child they'd always wanted, the child who could do no wrong. They never mentioned me, and when they did, it was often with an undertone of disappointment. It felt like they had already decided who I was, who I would always be. Then, one day, after almost a year of radio silence, they called again. I wasn't prepared for it. They had reached out to me about something that, at first, seemed like an innocent enough request. But it wasn't. Not really. It was a call about the inheritance Grandma had left me. At first, it didn't even occur to me that my parents had any interest in my life. But when they started mentioning my inheritance, Grandma's money, all the things she had worked so hard for, it hit me. They weren't calling to apologize. They weren't calling to make amends. No, they were calling because they needed something. My brother, it turned out, had gotten himself into serious trouble. It wasn't the first time he'd gotten into trouble, but this time, it was different. This time, he had gotten mixed up with some bad people, and now he needed rehab. My parents weren't offering to help. They were asking me to share my inheritance so that they could pay for his rehab. I was shocked. How could they be so brazen? They had abandoned me when I needed them most. And now they were asking for my money to bail out my brother, the golden child who never had to struggle like I did. The audacity of it was mind-boggling. I wasn't a fool. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. They were trying to use me again. For a moment, I considered it. Maybe I could help him, even if my parents didn't deserve a cent. But I realized something then. I was still that kid who needed love and support, and they hadn't given me either. Not when I was 14, not when I needed them most. and certainly not now. So I made my decision. If they wanted my help, there was one condition: they would have to admit everything. They would have to acknowledge the way they treated me, the way they treated Grandma, and how they had abandoned me. They would have to publicly apologize for everything. And you know what? They didn't like that. At all, they argued, called me cold-hearted, and told me I was being unreasonable. But I was done. I wasn't going to give in. They had to face what they had done to me before I would even think about helping them. And that was just the beginning. Because this time it was going to be different. I wasn't the same lost, desperate kid anymore. I was strong now, and I was going to make sure they knew that. It wasn't easy, maintaining that resolve. In my quiet moments, doubt crept in. I wasn't heartless. I didn't want to see my brother suffer, but I also knew that helping him without holding my parents accountable would mean accepting the same old cycle, one where I was the afterthought, and they would keep on using me. I refused to be the person they thought they could lean on whenever they messed up. I wasn't their backup plan anymore. I wasn't their safety net. They weren't used to me standing my ground. They were used to a kid who cowered in the corner, hoping for affection, hoping to be noticed. But I wasn't that kid anymore. And when I made my demand public acknowledgement of everything they'd done wrong, they were furious. For days, I didn't hear from them. The silence felt suffocating at first, but then it became a strange kind of relief. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't holding my breath for them to decide whether I mattered. They had made their decision years ago. Now it was my turn to make mine. Then, out of nowhere, they showed up at my door. It was unexpected, and yet, in a way, it felt inevitable. They had come to talk, to beg, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't about an apology. It wasn't even about my brother's rehab anymore. No, this time it was about money, my inheritance. The very thing that had made them realize they couldn't keep ignoring me. They came with their tails between their legs, but I could see right through them. Their faces weren't filled with guilt. They were filled with desperation. They weren't asking for my forgiveness. They were asking for my cash. At first, I didn't even want to hear what they had to say. My instinct was to slam the door and be done with it. But then I realized something. I had to hear them out. I needed to hear just how low they were willing to go, how far they were willing to push me, just to get what they wanted. "I know you're upset," my dad started, his voice faltering, something I hadn't heard in years. "But we're your family. We need your help. We're sorry for what happened, for how things went down. We're not perfect, but we're still your parents." He wasn't even looking me in the eye. His words were empty, rehearsed. They were saying the right things, but the sincerity was nowhere to be found. They were only sorry because they needed something from me, and I knew it. I didn't give him the satisfaction of an immediate response. Instead, I asked the question I'd been waiting to ask. "Why should I help you?" I felt the weight of the words even as I said them. Why should I help the people who abandoned me when I was 14, who told me they regretted having me in the first place? My mother's face went pale, her mouth opened to respond, but nothing came out. They didn't have an answer to that. They couldn't. For a moment, the room was silent. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath. Then I did something that surprised both of us. I let them speak. "Your brother," my mom began, but I cut her off. "I don't care about your excuses," I said sharply. "I don't care about your problems. I don't even care about my brother right now. What matters to me is the way you treated me. You treated me like I was disposable, like I wasn't worth your time, your effort. You treated me like I didn't matter. I could see them flinch at the truth. They had never expected me to confront them like this. They were used to the meek, invisible child who wouldn't dare stand up for herself. But that version of me was long gone." Finally, my dad spoke again, though his voice was now quieter, more defeated. "We made mistakes, okay? We know that. We're not asking you to forget them. We're just asking for a chance to make things right. A chance. A chance?" It was laughable. I wasn't interested in their chance to make it right. I had given them enough chances when I was growing up. I had spent my whole childhood hoping for a moment where they would see me, see the person I could be, if only they took the time. But they never did. "I'm done waiting for apologies that will never come," I told them, my voice calm, steady. "You don't get to dictate the terms of this anymore. If you want anything from me, anything at all, you have to do it my way, publicly." They didn't like it. I could tell. The look on their faces said everything. This wasn't what they had expected. They thought they could waltz back into my life and demand that I fix everything for them, but they had underestimated me. I'm not doing it, I continued. I'm not giving you money. I'm not helping you out without you owning up to what you did. You've hurt me in ways you'll never understand. And if you can't even admit that to yourselves, if you can't acknowledge the damage you caused me and Grandma, then there's no deal. There was a long pause, filled with nothing but their quiet, frustrated sighs. My mom started to cry, but it wasn't the kind of tearful apology I was waiting for. No, this was the kind of crying that comes when someone realizes they've lost control. They knew I wasn't going to budge, and I didn't. We won't do it, my dad finally said, his voice tight with anger. We're not going to make a public statement just for you. I stood there, watching the two people who should have been my support, my family, turn their backs on me yet again. It was the final confirmation I needed. They weren't going to change. Not for me, not for anyone. So with that, I made my decision clear. Then we're done. Don't ever come back. Don't even try to reach me again. And just like that, they left. Without another word. Without an apology. Without a single shred of acknowledgement that they had wronged me. But I felt a strange kind of peace settle in afterward. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for their approval. I wasn't clinging to the hope that maybe one day they would love me. I had released them from that responsibility, and in doing so, I had freed myself. Grandma wasn't around to see it, but she'd given me the tools I needed to stand up for myself. Her love had given me the strength I never thought I had. I could look at myself in the mirror now and know that I wasn't the person they had tried to mold me into. I wasn't a freak. I wasn't a burden. I was someone who had fought for herself, and for once, I was winning. The days after my parents left were oddly calm. It was as if a heavy cloud had lifted from my life, leaving behind a clarity I hadn't known I could have. I didn't feel guilt anymore, no matter how much they tried to lay it on me. In fact, I felt something closer to relief, a freedom I hadn't experienced since I was a child. The weight of constantly seeking their approval, of trying to be someone I wasn't for their sake, was finally gone. I didn't need their validation anymore. In the weeks that followed, I took a step back and reflected on everything. Grandma had always told me that healing was a process, that it would take time, and I wasn't in any rush to push through it. I had a lot of scars to deal with, scars that weren't just physical but emotional too. Every time I remembered the way they treated me, the way they abandoned me, the anger I had been holding on to started to resurface. But this time, I didn't let it consume me. I just acknowledged it, and then I moved on. I knew I had to keep moving forward. I was on my own now, and for the first time in my life, that felt like a real opportunity. I had spent so much time being a victim of my circumstances, but now I had the chance to be the person I wanted to be, not the one my parents or anyone else tried to make me. My life wasn't perfect. It still wasn't without its challenges, especially with my medical conditions. But I was determined to find a way through. I started working part-time at a local cafe to make some money, and I used whatever free time I had to study and work on myself. Every day felt like a new chapter, one that I was finally writing for myself. I even started making friends again, something I had pushed away for so long. It wasn't easy to trust people after everything with my parents, but I knew I couldn't live in isolation forever. I joined a group at school that focused on mental health awareness, something that was close to my heart after everything I had been through. The people there understood me in a way that no one else ever had. They didn't judge me for my struggles. Instead, they supported me. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in the world. Then, about 6 months after the last conversation with my parents, something unexpected happened. I got a message from a lawyer, someone I had never heard of before. My first thought was that it was a mistake. But when I opened it, I saw something that took me completely by surprise. It was about my grandmother's will. It turned out that my parents knew something I didn't. They knew that when my grandmother passed, she had left everything to me. Not just her house or the money she had saved, she had left me everything. I didn't even know how to process it. This wasn't something I had expected or asked for. It wasn't something I had ever thought about. But now, it was mine. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, was now in my hands. I didn't know what to do with it at first. The money was a blessing, of course, but it also came with a responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. I knew my grandmother had always wanted the best for me, and she had left me this to give me the chance she believed I deserved. But it also meant I was going to have to face the fact that, despite everything, my parents would never see me the way they saw my brother. They would never see me as the child they loved. And that hurt more than I was ready to admit. The lawyer's letter explained that my parents had been notified of the will, but there was no mention of their involvement in the inheritance. It was clear that they had hoped to get something out of it. Maybe they thought they could worm their way back into my life, now that they knew I was financially stable. But they were wrong. They hadn't changed. They hadn't acknowledged their mistakes. And the money? It wasn't for them. It was for me, just like Grandma always intended. I realized then that my decision to cut them out had been the right one. I wasn't going to let them back in just because they saw a chance to benefit from my success. So I did what I had to do. I took control. I called the lawyer and instructed them to go ahead with the inheritance process. I made it clear that I didn't want any interference from my parents. The money was mine, and it wasn't for them to claim. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I wondered if I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. But then I remembered everything they had said to me, everything they had done. They didn't deserve my forgiveness, not yet, at least. They hadn't earned it. If they ever truly wanted to be part of my life again, they had to earn that right. Not through words, but through actions. Days passed, and the silence continued. My parents didn't try to contact me again. Part of me expected them to show up, to beg for forgiveness, but they never did. And that made me realize something important. I had moved on. I had stopped hoping for a relationship that wasn't meant to be, but that didn't mean I was completely unaffected. Sometimes, I still thought about what could have been. I thought about the family I could have had, the parents who could have loved me for who I was. But then I reminded myself of all the progress I had made. I reminded myself that I had built something for myself, something my parents couldn't take away, no matter how hard they tried. I had my own life now. I had my own space, my own purpose. I had my grandmother's love, and I was going to carry that with me. I was going to make her proud. I was going to keep moving forward no matter what. And then, out of nowhere, I got a message from my brother. It was the first time he had reached out to me in over a year. I was cautious at first. I wasn't sure what he wanted. He had always been the perfect son, the golden child, the one who never had to face the same struggles I did. But when I opened the message, I was stunned. It was an apology, a real one. He admitted he had taken his good fortune for granted. He told me that he realized how much I had gone through and that he regretted how we drifted apart. He said he wanted to fix things. He wanted to be a better brother. For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was surprised, sure, but I was also open to the possibility of a new relationship, one that was based on mutual respect, not expectations. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready to let him back in just yet. But for the first time in years, I wasn't holding on to the past. I wasn't clinging to the old hurts that had defined my relationship with him. And that, more than anything else, was a sign that I was finally healing. Time has a funny way of changing things. I thought I had everything figured out, cutting off my parents, building a life on my own, finding peace in the chaos. But life, as it always does, throws curveballs when you least expect them. My brother's message was one of those curveballs. It had been weeks since I'd read his apology, and I was still processing it. He'd always been the perfect one in our family, the one who seemed to have it all figured out. He didn't have the health issues I dealt with. He didn't have to fight for attention, fight for validation, fight for love. And for years, I resented him for that. It wasn't his fault, but in my eyes, he was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. So when he reached out to me, I didn't know what to feel. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to tell him how much he'd hurt me over the years, but something stopped me. Maybe it was because I realized I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't that bitter, angry kid who had been left behind. I had grown, and as much as I had every right to stay angry, I also knew that holding on to that anger wasn't going to help me heal. I decided to respond, but not immediately. I needed to think it through. A lot had happened in the years we hadn't spoken. Our relationship wasn't just broken, it was shattered. And even though he was apologizing now, it didn't erase everything. The trust had been eroded, the hurt had been ingrained in my bones, and rebuilding it wouldn't be easy. I took a deep breath and sat down to write a response. I wasn't looking for some grand reconciliation or emotional closure. I didn't need him to fix everything for me. What I needed more than anything was to be honest with him and with myself. I hear you, I typed slowly. I really do. But I can't just forget everything that's happened. It's not that simple. I spent so many years feeling like I didn't matter, and that hurt more than anything else. You were the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, and I resented you for that. I resented that you didn't have to fight for attention, for love. I resented that you had the life I could never have. But I'm not that person anymore. I don't want to stay stuck in the past, and I'm not going to hold on to that anger forever. But healing takes time, and I'm not ready to just pick up where we left off. I hope you understand that. It was the most honest thing I had said in years. I wasn't asking for perfection, and I wasn't asking for anything beyond the truth. I knew that if he wanted to have a relationship with me, it had to be built on mutual respect and understanding. The past was part of us, yes, but it didn't have to define us forever. When I sent the message, I didn't expect an immediate response, but he replied quickly, which surprised me. I get it, he said. I was blind to what you were going through. I didn't understand, and I'm sorry. I can't change the past, but I want to do better. I don't want to keep drifting apart. I don't want us to stay broken. But I know it's going to take time, and I'm willing to wait to prove to you that I'm here. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here. His words weren't perfect, and they didn't undo the years of damage. But they were a start. For the first time, I saw that he understood the pain I'd carried with me for so long. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild something that could resemble the bond we once shared. Over the next few months, we took it slow. There were no big heart-to-heart talks. Instead, it was small gestures, texts, phone calls, the occasional meet-up for coffee. Nothing too overwhelming, nothing too emotional. We were both trying to find our footing again, trying to understand how we could navigate this new version of our relationship. It was awkward at first, and at times, I felt myself pulling away, scared of what it meant to let him back in. But with each passing day, it became a little easier. We weren't trying to fix the past anymore. We were just trying to move forward. But just as things were starting to feel normal again, another wave of change came crashing into my life. I had been living on my own for some time now, renting a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was nothing extravagant, but it was mine. I was comfortable, and that was all I needed. Or at least, that's what I thought. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, one received a call from the lawyer who had handled my grandmother's will. "Hello," he said. "I have some updates regarding your grandmother's estate. There's something you need to be aware of." My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't uncommon for lawyers to contact me about estate matters, but there was a sudden sense of urgency in his voice that caught me off guard. "There's a complication," he continued. "It's regarding the house. The deed was not properly transferred, and there's some legal paperwork that hasn't been finalized. It's something that needs immediate attention." I froze. My grandmother's house was more than just a property. It was a part of her legacy, her history. I had thought everything had been settled, but now it seemed like there was another hurdle to overcome. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no escaping it. I had to go back. I had to go back to the place I thought I'd left behind. The house, the memories, my parents. The thought of going back to that house, the place where I had been abandoned, made my stomach churn. I wasn't ready to face it, not after everything that had happened, but I didn't have a choice. I had to take care of this. Grandma was gone, and I was the one left to handle things. I called my brother, unsure of what to expect. "Hey, I need you to come with me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's something about the house that I need to deal with, and I can't do it alone." For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then my brother spoke. "I'll be there. We'll figure this out together." It wasn't the grand reunion I had imagined, but it was a start. I wasn't facing this alone, and maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something new. The drive to my grandmother's house was longer than I had expected. My mind raced with memories of that place, memories of feeling abandoned, neglected, unwanted. I tried to push them away, but they crept in, gnawing at me with each passing mile. My brother was quiet beside me, his eyes focused on the road, but I could tell he was just as uneasy as I was. He wasn't the one who had been left behind, but he knew the weight of our family's history. When we pulled up to the house, everything looked just as it had before. The large oak tree in the front yard, the red brick exterior, the small garden that Grandma had always kept tidy. It was all so familiar, and yet it felt foreign. This place had been my refuge once, but now it felt like a ghost of a life I had left behind. "I'll go inside first," I said, swallowing hard as I stared at the front door. My brother nodded without a word, giving me the space I needed. Walking through the door was like stepping into another time. Everything was still in its place: the furniture, the photos on the walls, the little trinkets Grandma had collected over the years. The smell of lavender lingered in the air, a scent I hadn't realized I missed until now. But despite the familiarity, there was something unsettling about it. This house no longer felt like home. The lawyer had explained that the paperwork for the house wasn't finalized properly, and now I was here to make sure everything was in order. But as I stood there in the hallway, I realized that the house was just the beginning. There were deeper issues to deal with. I had to confront the legacy my parents had left me: their abandonment, their failure, their cold indifference. It was all tied to this house, to everything I had been through, and now I had to face it. I was halfway through the paperwork when my brother entered the room. He had been pacing outside, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation, but he had come in anyway. "Do you need any help with that?" he asked, his voice tentative. I looked up at him, surprised. It was the first time he had shown any real interest in what I was doing, in what I was dealing with. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. "I think I've got it," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "But thanks." We stood there in silence for a while, each of us lost in our thoughts. My brother's presence was a comfort, but it also reminded me of everything I had lost. I wasn't sure if we would ever truly understand each other, but at least we were trying. And that was more than I could say about my parents. Eventually, the lawyer arrived, a man in his mid-40s with a calm demeanor. He led us through the final steps of the paperwork, and I signed my name, officially taking possession of the house and everything in it. It felt like a hollow victory. I wasn't sure what to do with it all. It was a symbol of my grandmother's love, but it also felt like a reminder of everything that had been wrong in my life. Once the formalities were done, the lawyer left, and it was just my brother and me. The silence was heavy, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt more like an understanding, a mutual recognition of everything that had happened. "I never really understood what you went through," my brother said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I mean, I knew things weren't easy for you, but I never really understood the depth of it. I thought Mom and Dad were just strict, but I see now it was more than that." His words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had wanted him to understand, to see the pain I carried. And now he did. But it wasn't just about the understanding, it was about the change that came with it. My brother wasn't the same person I had resented all these years. He wasn't the golden child anymore. He was just human. And that made all the difference. "It's not about you," I said quietly, meeting his gaze. "It never was. It was about them, what they did to me. It shaped everything. I had to fight for my place in the world, and they made sure I knew I wasn't wanted." He nodded, his face filled with a mixture of regret and guilt. "I can't change what happened, but I can try to make things right now. I don't want you to feel alone anymore. I'm here." It was a simple statement, but it meant more than I could put into words. I wasn't ready to forgive him completely, not yet. But I knew this was a step forward. Maybe we couldn't go back to how things were, but we could move forward. Together. We spent the rest of the afternoon going through the house. It was a strange experience, sorting through Grandma's things, finding memories tucked away in corners. There were old photo albums, letters from her friends, and pieces of jewelry that she had collected over the years. Some things I kept, others I packed away, unsure of what to do with them. But in the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally accepting my place in the world and in my family's history. As the sun began to set, my brother and I sat outside, on the porch that had once been a place of solace for me. It was quiet, the world around us slowly fading into the night. We didn't speak much, but the weight of everything we had shared hung in the air. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let my past define me anymore. I'm glad you're here, I said, breaking the silence. It's been a long time, but maybe we can start over. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something real in his eyes. It wasn't just guilt or obligation, it was understanding. And maybe a little bit of hope. Yeah, he replied softly, maybe we can. It wasn't the perfect ending. It wasn't a fairy tale, and it certainly wasn't a quick fix, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power to move forward, to build the future I wanted, not the one that had been handed to me. The next day, I packed up what was left of my grandmother's things, locked the door behind me, and drove away. This time, there was no lingering sense of abandonment, no bitterness weighing me down. I was leaving that house, but I wasn't leaving behind my past. I was carrying it with me, taking the lessons I had learned, and using them to build something better. And maybe, just maybe, I had started to forgive both my parents and myself. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but I was ready to let go of the anger, the resentment, and the past that had held me captive for so long. It was time to move forward. And this time, I was doing it on my terms. Story 2, you're whining, but why? In any case, you never paid rent. My father sneered. Really? I chuckled. After that, I stopped making the mortgage payment that I had been making for years. They are pleading with me for assistance as they face eviction. The words came out of her mouth as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, with no preamble, no trace of regret. We'll give them your space, my mother said, cutting her bagel as thinly as possible, as if she hadn't just shoved me off a precipice without any prior notice. I was still living under their roof at the age of 25, working full-time in a warehouse, and making a concerted effort to save money so that I could finally move out without becoming financially unstable. Every paycheck involves careful balance. Others contributed to household food, others paid bills, and some went towards savings. Then there was the water heater I had purchased last autumn, which no one seemed to remember that I had paid for. No one was being taken advantage of by me. I was just keeping quiet, silently and carefully navigating the situation. I pretended to be on borrowed land. All right, I said, even trying to hide any discomfort with a little grin. Tonight, I'll begin packing my belongings. I made up my mind right then. I was finished. The room wasn't really the point, isn't it never? That chamber was only the last fragment of a wall that was collapsing, the tipping moment that destroyed the delusion I had been living under since I was a teenager. I had never truly felt at home in that house. I was only a convenience, like a machine that ran silently in the background until it broke down or became a hindrance. I went to work as normal that morning. However, a change had already occurred deep within me. I would not return, not indefinitely. I didn't tell anyone about it. Rather, I looked through rental ads over my lunch hour, discovered a little one-bedroom flat 10 minutes from my workplace, and promptly made a deposit. Rent is paid in full for 6 months. I had been putting money up for another use. Maybe a car, maybe a future without the sense of exile. However, it seemed like the appropriate choice. I went home that night, like I always did. My sister required the Wi-Fi for her online class, so I fixed it when it disconnected in the middle of supper and still grinned when my mother asked me to take out the trash. However, I had already left in my mind. And that evening, I began methodically dismantling all of the obligations I had assumed on their behalf. For the past 18 months, I began with the grass every Saturday morning. I raked the cuttings, edged the borders, mowed it, and even reseeded the exposed areas in the spring. All of this without request or recognition. My father had taken care of it years ago, but the responsibility had subtly moved to me as soon as I was old enough to operate the mower. No appreciation, no acknowledgement, only a presumption. I let the grass grow that weekend. I didn't touch it, but it was already tall from last week's rain. Treating it like any other day, I drove off for coffee, walking directly by the shed where the mower was kept. My father was waiting in the front garden when I got back, folded arms. He looked at the overgrown grass as if it had insulted him directly. Have you forgotten to mow the lawn? Already sounding irritated, he asked. I just shrugged. No, I simply wasn't in the mood. He blinked. as though he couldn't understand the idea. Will you do it later then? Don't think so, I said casually as I passed him. I'm occupied. Even though it was the tiniest insurrection, the effects were felt right away. The Wi-Fi was down once more by Sunday evening. I heard my sister yelling from her bedroom. Suddenly, her Zoom tutoring session ended. Normally, after several failures over the last year, I would have reset the router, replaced the faulty coaxial wire behind the TV, and restarted the connection. Instead, I stayed in the kitchen and pretended not to hear her anguish as I carefully spooned chili into a Tupperware container. Panicked, she shouted out, "Mom, the Wi-Fi is down once more." My mother said sharply, "I don't know how to fix this from another room." He's where? After letting them struggle for half an hour, I went out the door with my supper prep in hand. Nobody made a single comment. I stopped picking up my sister from school that week. I didn't warn anyone in advance. I have dealt with it almost every Tuesday and Thursday for months. I had subtly changed my personal schedule to accommodate my father's refusal to depart early and my mother's conflicting work schedule. Similar to everything else I handled, after Thursday came and went, my sister was left in the school office for 2 hours before someone came to get her. The air was thick with unsaid tension, suffocating. When I walked through the door that night, "Your sister wasn't picked up by you today?" My mother said. She said in an emotionless tone. "No," I said, setting down my keys. I remembered that she looked directly at me, anticipating more. Not a word more. I went into my room after passing her. I think that's when they really began to see how much I had been dealing with. However, that was just the start. The kitchen sink began to leak once more on the third day. Like an old issue that had been momentarily buried, the steady, rhythmic trickle had reappeared. The year before, I had fixed it by swapping out the defective gasket for one I had purchased. To get the right size, I even drove to a specialty hardware store across town. At the time, I didn't bring it up. I just corrected it and went about my day. Both the leak and the little puddle that was growing behind the cabinet had returned. With a roll of paper towels in hand, my father squatted next to the sink and searched the mess with a flashlight as if he were looking into a crime scene. He muttered to himself. He looked up as I passed, drinking my coffee. "Don't you know how to solve this?" he inquired. "Yes," I responded, pausing in the doorway for a moment. "Yes, I do." He continued to stare, waiting for an answer. I simply continued to walk. When dinner was done that night, I didn't tidy up. No cleaning countertops, no washing dishes. While the others sat there acting as if they didn't see, I just stretched, got up, and walked to my room. The unsaid tension was now throbbing through the home like a live entity. I was at work on Friday when my mother's message chimed on my phone. "Will you be able to pay this month's power bill? We neglected that your father's salary check is still pending and that it is due today." I took a moment to look at the wording. I had been discreetly handling last-minute invoices like that for more than a year, making sure they avoided late fines more times than I could remember. To keep their services from being terminated, I had even programmed reminders onto my own phone. Not now. "I apologize, but I now have rent. Do you recall?" I answered. She didn't answer. When I got home the following evening, the porch light was off. The home was quieter than ever and seemed darker than normal. The dining table was occupied by my sister. She was clearly annoyed as she flipped through her maths assignments, frantically using the incorrect end of a pencil to scratch at the page. "You didn't pick up the paper from the printer?" Without raising her head, she inquired. "It has always been me who purchased it." I had never forgotten. Not at all. Putting my rucksack down beside the door, I said, hoped that someone else would handle it this time. She stomped out of the hallway after slamming the pencil into the table. My mother stood, observing me with a keen look, examining me as though I were a puzzle with all the pieces misplaced. I looked her in the eye and grinned, calmly, not arrogantly. Slowly, everything was falling apart, not because I had acted in a dramatic or harsh manner. I had just taken a step back. That was their biggest source of unease. The morning of Saturday came without coffee. When my mother realized they were out of coffee grounds, I heard the sound of cupboard doors opening and slamming, followed by a low, mumbled curse. It had always been me who supplied it. I picked some bulk bags on my way home from the supermarket close to my place of employment. Never given credit, replaced just now. As though it had betrayed them, they gazed at an empty coffee tin in a quiet brewer that morning. My keys were in my palm as I sat in the living room, already clothed, enjoying a bowl of cereal. I said nothing. My mother looked up at her cup, which was now empty but for hot water. "Are you leaving?" she asked. She said in an even yet curious tone. I swallowed my last spoonful and said, "Yeah." Getting to know the owner of the property, grabbing a few essentials at the property owner's word. She stiffened a little. Before she could ask for additional information, I simply nodded, got up, and went outside. I returned many boxes 2 hours later, heavier and much more certain of my choice. I began organizing my space that afternoon. Not quickly, not ostentatiously, but deliberately and gradually. Container by container. I brought my things out and put them in the rear or trunk of my car before returning for another. All the while, I was painfully aware that they were watching me. Nobody asked me any questions. By dinner, nobody had volunteered to help. My room was crowded to half capacity. My father pretended that nothing was amiss as he flipped through the channels of television. My sister continued to stare at her phone, but my mother started slowly, trying to change the situation. After our conversation, we decided that perhaps we shouldn't let Olivia use your room just yet. I stopped, the fork still in midair. Why? She glanced at my dad, who acted as though he hadn't heard. Perhaps now isn't the greatest time, given all that's going on. I bit into it, chewed, and then swallowed. Now is just the right time. The room became silent. I added that I had already signed an agreement. By Tuesday, I will be relocating. My sister blinked. "Hold on. Are you serious?" I looked her in the eye. "Olivia, when I wasn't home, you packed my possessions into plastic containers. I found them stacked under the staircase. So, yeah, I mean it." She didn't dispute. My mother's voice dropped to something softer. "You should have spoken up." "I did," I countered. "You just didn't listen, because I said it with a smile." Then I resumed eating, unbothered while they sat in silence, as if the power dynamic had shifted overnight. And they were only now grasping that I meant every word, that I wouldn't be staying. By Monday evening, I was nothing but an echo in that house. Boxes sat neatly stacked beside the door, labeled in thick black marker. Kitchen items, clothing tools, assorted electronic. Every property I had claimed as mine was already either locked in my car or sitting inside my new apartment. Still barren yet bursting with new beginnings. Just a short drive away. But I took my time. No rushed departure. No smashing doors. I wanted them to experience it, to identify it. The silence of the home, when I wasn't discreetly keeping things running rubbish, had still to be put out. The mailbox remained unchecked. The upstairs hallway bathroom produced that constant gurgling sound every several hours, something I had corrected 3 times previously. But not this time. I strolled past it all, a odd sensation of serenity settling within me. At one time, my father blocked my path in the kitchen. "You truly believe this is the best move?" he inquired, arms folded, attempting to look more involved than he actually was. I went to the refrigerator and opened it. Items I bought last week made up half of the contents. I was the only one who ever ate the multi-pack of yogurt, a half-drunk jug of orange juice that usually disappeared before I could finish it. I turned to face him after grabbing a bottle of water. "Yes, for the first time in a long time," I said. His face grew stern. "Do you believe it's that simple? Everything, rent, utilities, etc." I held the pause just long enough to meet his gaze. Then I grinned. "For the last 12 months, I have been paying your bills," I said. "I believe I'll handle mine rather well." He didn't have an answer. He simply gazed, as though anticipating a joke that would never come. Then he turned to go, upstairs. The door to my sister was open. I took a quick look into her room, which used to be mine. She had already started decorating, scattering pastel-colored couches and hanging delicate fairy lights. However, the wall-mounted bookcases and the section of plasterboard that I had fixed when she kicked a hole in it during a tantrum were still in place. She saw me glancing. "You might have just refused," she whispered, not looking at me. I gave a nod. "You may have also inquired." I continued to move. There was no longer any bitterness. The fire was extinguished long ago. What was left was something sharper, something resolute. Clarity. Officially, I left on Tuesday morning. After putting the last box in the back seat of my car, I gave the home one more glance. Not with feeling, not with sorrow, just a basic evaluation. The Wi-Fi was still down, the recycle bins were overflowing, and the porch light was still broken. Everything felt poetically ironic. I went into the kitchen and taped one sheet of paper to the refrigerator before I left. The phrases were straightforward and truthful, printed in dark ink. No extra words, no feeling. Obligations. I took care of that you probably never noticed. Each and every week, mow the lawn. Regularly picked up the trash and recyclables. And when 5 utility bills were overdue, I paid them. Over 10, fixed the Wi-Fi router. Over 9 months, around $1,200 was spent on food. 32 times he drove Olivia home from school, cleaned up after supper almost every night, and changed the porch light bulbs 3 times. $200 was donated to Dad's auto repair. I added a last sentence, kept this house functioning while being treated like an outsider at the bottom. I wish you success in handling everything. I'm finally moving out to live in my own space as a guest. Then, for the final time, I shut the door behind me. I didn't get any calls the first day. Messages began to come in by the second. My mother comes first. A missed phone call and a text message. Hello, there is a problem with the internet. Can you recall the router's login credentials? Then my dad, trying to seem indifferent but failing to hide his annoyance. Where do you store the lawnmower's key? I paid them both no attention. By Friday, the messages had become confused and guilt-tripping. Olivia texted me only one word. Really? I reasoned that they thought I would give in and ultimately return to assist. As soon as it became inconvenient, perhaps they believed I was only expressing a point and not going away for good. They had made a mistake. In the meantime, I was finally feeling like I belonged in my flat. I set up shelves, picked out my own cookware, and turned up the music to my preferred volume. The quiet I had craved was no longer oppressive. It was sincere, undemanding, and tranquil. I had the impression that everyone had finally ceased expecting me to do anything. My mother phoned again a week later. I responded this time. She sounded frustrated and strained in her voice. You didn't have to depart in that manner. I said nothing, allowing her to go on. She said, we didn't realize how much you were handling. The rubbish, the bills. I didn't realize it was all your fault. Yes, I gave an equal response. I am aware. We were silent for a long time. Olivia is struggling with school pickups. She has trouble riding the bus, and both of us work. I didn't respond. It never occurred to us that everything would fall apart so quickly. You never saw what was keeping everything together, which is why, after another pause, she tried to gather herself before saying, well, I hope you're happy now. She was unable to notice my smile. I always was, and I still am. I had the impression in the days that followed that I was looking at my former life through a pane of glass, something I could see but not touch. I disregarded Olivia's last text, and she never texted me again. My dad never got back to me. Too proud to do so, probably. My mother, on the other hand, sometimes sent texts, each with a tentative tone. I hope everything is okay on your end. This place is a little hectic. She never stated outright that they missed me, just suggested that there was a change in the feeling of the house. Even though I never responded, I continued to hear from neighbors and people we had in common. Overgrowth had taken over the garden. Olivia had to walk home in the rain after missing a few more pickups. It took them half a day to remember to pay the bill after the water supply was turned off, and the front porch light kept flickering, seemingly in anguish. The little routine tasks that they had always taken care of themselves overwhelmed them, the same ones I'd handled with ease. The odd thing is that I didn't feel like I had won. Their fight had left them without any sense of fulfillment or residual animosity. I was no longer even angry. I just had to go on. I got used to my new schedule. I began cooking for myself. Nothing fancy, just basic food. However, they were more delicious than anything I had ever eaten in that home. They belonged to me, not because the components were superior. I also had better sleep. The floors outside my door no longer squeak at strange hours. No sudden knocks requesting that I do a short errand. No hidden expectations weighing me down all the time. Nothing except silence. A real, unbroken silence. When I got home from work late, about a week and a half after I left, I discovered a little package stuck beneath the door of my apartment. My name was written in my mother's handwriting across the front, with no sender information. It read within one lined notebook paper sheet, precisely folded at the top. We were unaware that the list below was different from mine, in that it was haphazardly written down, lacked bullet points, and was unstructured. The internet, the groceries, the leaking sink, the porch light problem, the garbage, Olivia's school rides, and the emptiness. We never treated you like a son. One final statement read at the end. I apologize. That was it. No cries for me to come back. No hollow pledges to make changes. Only acknowledgement. And for the first time since leaving, I sensed a change in myself rather than in them. There was no closure. Not quite. But maybe it was sufficient. I never responded. Not because I didn't care. I felt a lot, if anything. After leaving that letter on my kitchen counter for hours, I read it again the following morning and unfolded and folded it. It thought about what it meant, but words on paper couldn't make up for years of being ignored. The times I was only acknowledged when something needed to be fixed or paid for were not undone by a hastily written list. At last, they had started to take notice of the gap I created. It was obvious, but I was no longer in a position to fill it. Olivia reportedly finally learned how to ride the bus alone by the second week, but she missed it twice and had to wait in the rain once more. My mom had engaged a lawn care company. My father unintentionally disconnected the entire modem while trying to reset the Wi-Fi, which turned off the house alarm and left their smart TV inoperable for a full day. Like someone relearning to walk after losing the ability to use their legs, they were adjusting slowly and awkwardly. And me? Without their expectations, I was flourishing. I began to do things that I had never before permitted myself to do. I bought a bookshelf because I wanted one, not because I had to. I made it a personal ritual to treat myself to a meal out every Friday. I even signed up for a weekend woodworking class, something I had put off for years because there was always someone in need of help, a ride, or money. I hadn't even realized how much weight I had been carrying until it was no longer my responsibility, but the weight had been lifted. While tidying up my inbox one evening, I discovered a calendar alert that I had set up months prior. Check the registration of Dad's car in case he runs out of money again. I stared at it for a while before deciding to delete it. I just let out my breath for the first time that evening while lounging on my small balcony with my legs propped up on a plastic chair. I was not expecting an unavoidable catastrophe. I didn't hear a voice calling out to me. Not that I was bracing myself for another request under the guise of a small favor. Once overwhelming, the silence no longer seemed empty. It was peaceful. I haven't gone back. Not even for visits. Not even for celebration. The calls ceased. Perhaps they feel ashamed. Perhaps they're simply drained. Or perhaps they finally recognized that I wasn't just an occupant in that household. I was the structure holding everything in place. And when the foundation disappears, everything begins to collapse. The note I had taped to the refrigerator is probably still hanging there. Or maybe they removed it. The way someone discards an object that stirs too much guilt to keep looking at. Regardless, it had already served its purpose. Farewell. Story 3. I never imagined that a typical Tuesday night would challenge all of my preconceived notions about my family. Sophie, my 5-year-old daughter, was coloring at the kitchen table while I was at home making supper. My phone rang. On the other end, my mother's voice wavered. Olivia? Your dad? A heart attack has struck him. Memorial Hospital is where we are. The ground beneath my feet seemed like it was tilting. Michael Bennett, my father, had always been the epitome of well-being. 60-year-old marathon runners, eating organic food before it became popular, and giving us endless lectures about the need of physical activity. There was no chance of a heart attack. I'm en route. I was able to say that while immediately grabbing my car keys. In only a few minutes, my husband James came to see Sophie give me a firm embrace before I departed. He murmured that he will be all right. The strongest person I've ever met is your dad. It seemed unreal to travel to the hospital. Memories came flooding back. I'm learning to ride a bike from my dad. When I graduated from college, he smiled proudly. He sobbed as he escorted me down the aisle. My rock had always been him, the The one thing that is certain in an uncertain world. There was mayhem in the emergency department. Nurses hurrying by, beeping monitors. My nose was stinging from the strong disinfectant odor. In a plastic chair, Mom sat. Tears stained her normally flawless makeup. When she spotted me, she sprang to her feet and seized me in a frantic hug. "They're testing," she added. She spoke softly over my shoulder. When it occurred, he was at his office. I'm grateful. After recognizing the signs, his assistant promptly dialed 911. Fear clawed at my chest, but I tried to be strong and hugged her close. Dad must be all right. He was just 62. Two vitals are too young to be resting in a hospital bed. Hours passed slowly. Marcus, my younger brother, showed up. His face was furrowed with concern, and his law office suit was wrinkled. Every time a doctor passed by, we jumped as we sat in nervous stillness. Around midnight, a weary-looking doctor came over to us. When he stated, "Mr. Bennett is stable," I felt my mother's bag next to me with relief. He wants to visit his daughter. For now, only one guest. Squeeze my hand, Mom. Tell him that I adore him. My feet clicking on the linoleum, I followed the doctor to antiseptic halls. Dad was lying in a separate room, and the white hospital linen strangely made him appear smaller. He was attached to a number of machines by wires and tools, all of which beeped continuously in the low light. I took his hand and said, "Hey, Daddy." It was frigid on his flesh. He opened his eyes and fixed them on my face with such intensity that I felt uneasy. "Olivia." His voice was husky as he spoke. "I have something to tell you. I've carried it for 30 years. You need to sleep, Dad. Later we may discuss." He tightened his hold on my hand. "No, it must be right now. You must be aware of the reality if I am harmed. What is the truth?" For a minute, as though he was gaining strength, he closed his eyes. He opened them again and found tears in them. "Your biological father is not me. Your mom is unaware of it. I am the only one who knows. And, as well as your biological father, the world came to a standstill." I gazed at him, my ears rushing with blood. I was certain I had misheard. "What are you discussing?" Dad's hands were shaking as he reached under his pillow and took out an old, shabby-looking envelope. "This letter has been with me for 30 years. Go through it. Everything will make sense to you." I accepted the envelope. Numb fingers. Age had yellowed the paper. The handwriting was strange, yet it was also somewhat recognizable. My father's monitors pounded relentlessly in the background as I started reading, signaling the points at which my whole world started to fall apart. "Dear Michael," started the letter. "I'll be gone by the time you read this. Catherine is unaware and will never be aware. Olivia, however, is my daughter. You were away for your father's funeral that night. The guilt has been with me for years. Catherine was at risk, mourning the loss of her sister. I was also present to console her. We both instantly regretted it. I knew I had to go as soon as she informed me she was expecting. I could never be a better guy than you. Love her. Keep her safe. Daniel, please pardon me." Tears clouded my vision as I looked up from the letter. Mom's brother-in-law, Daniel, the one who vanished following Aunt Sarah's passing. Dad gave a slow nod. "When Sarah passed away, your mother was crushed. I was out of town making arrangements for my father's funeral. One night they made a mistake, yet Daniel was there for her. It only required that. In an attempt to comprehend this impossibility, my mind raced. Before Sarah passed away in a car accident, Daniel was married to Sarah, my mother's sister. His successful legal practice and innumerable unsolved questions were left behind when he disappeared. His mother had always talked about him with a mix of sadness and rage, calling him a coward for fleeing when the family most needed him. However, how did you find out?" I stumbled. "Has he told you?" Dad's fingers fiddled with his blanket's edge. "No. 9 months after that night, the letter arrived. Only 1 week since your birth. In our mailbox, I discovered it. No address for return. I instantly recognized his handwriting. And you never said anything for 30 years. What good would it have done?" Dad's voice was tired but firm. "Your mother was happy. You were perfect. This beautiful baby girl who looked at me with such trust. I made my choice that day. I burned the envelope, but I kept the letter just in case. In case of what? And if something happened to me. You deserve to know the truth about where you come from. But Olivia," His grasp on my hand tightened again. This doesn't affect anything. You're my daughter in every manner that matters. I sat there letting the tears stream freely. Now every memory of my youth seemed to alter and reconfigure itself. I'm learning to ride a bike from my dad. His tolerance while I struggled with arithmetic assignments. The way he shone with delight at every school play and piano concert. Had he looked at me differently? Knowing I wasn't his head, he scanned my face for indications of another guy. Does Marcus know? I asked, immediately thinking about my younger brother. Dad shook his head. I am the only one who knows. And now you. A nurse came in the doorway. Sorry, but it's time for Mr. Bennett to get some rest. The letter felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as I got to my feet, my legs trembling. I will return tomorrow. I leaned down to give him a forehead kiss as I made the pledge. Olivia? When I got to the door, he called. Know that I love you no matter what you do with this knowledge. Ever since I held you for the first time, I have adored you. Furthermore, nothing will ever alter it. Unable to respond, I nodded and ran out into the hall. As I walked towards the waiting area, Mom and Marcus glanced up eagerly. What's up with him? Mom inquired, attempting to grasp my hand. I examined her face. The face of a lady who was unaware that her secret, which had been hidden for 3 decades, was about to come out. She was unaware that her husband had been bearing this load alone for years, or that I had been born out of her weakness with her deceased sister's husband. He's sleeping. Silently, I said. He will be all right, according to the doctors, but nothing will ever be all right again. That evening, the note was securely concealed in my handbag as I drove home. I was aware that this was only the start. The release of the truth would have an impact on every aspect of our existence. I kept thinking about options. After I eventually climbed into bed next to my spouse, who was sleeping, Daniel took the decision to flee, my father's decision to love the kid of another man. And now I have a decision to make. How do I handle a fact that could ruin my family? I couldn't sleep since my mind was racing with questions. Did Daniel survive? Was the girl he left behind ever on his mind? Above all, should I tell my mother the truth about what actually transpired that evening 30 years ago? Or should I do as my father had done and protect her? There would be more decisions and more questions in the morning. But I laid in the dark for the moment. A heart attack impacted my life forever. And a letter from 30 years ago that had at last come to light. I sat at my kitchen table the following morning, gazing at old family pictures that were strewn all over the place. I was left alone with my thoughts and a pile of memories that seemed like falsehoods because my daughter Sophie had just left for school and James was at work. I grabbed a picture from my 5th birthday celebration. While Dad was there, I was smiling and covered in chocolate cake. No, Michael. Even though it seemed incorrect, I corrected myself. Gazed at me with utter devotion. How many times had he looked for Daniel in my features? How many times had he pondered whether someone would notice today? I didn't resemble him at all. I took out the letter again, my hands shaking as I looked more closely at the penmanship. Daniel Parker. My father by birth. He was always on the fringes of family get-togethers prior to Aunt Sarah's passing, and I had hazy memories of him from my early years. I'm tall and have black hair, silent, yet witty enough to make everyone chuckle. Shortly after Sarah's death, he vanished, and no one had heard from him ever then. It buzzed on my phone. It's the 3rd time Mom has called this morning. I let the voicemail go. How might I communicate with her? Being aware of what I was aware of? How could I not tell her the truth when I looked into her eyes? Rather, I put Daniel Parker lawyer into the search bar on my laptop. The majority of the hundreds of results that appeared were either from different states or were too recent. I then discovered an old newspaper story from 1993 hidden on page 4. Daniel Parker, a local lawyer, departs a prominent firm. According to the story, he left Stewart and Associates, one of the best legal firms in the city, for personal reasons after his wife passed away. My breath caught when I saw the picture. I smiled like my mom. However, those eyes were definitely heads. Once more, my phone buzzed. Marcus was live this time. You're where? Mom is going crazy. Dad is leaving the intensive care unit today. I shut my eyes. In my fixation on the past, guilt washed over me. I had nearly forgotten about Dad's illness. I'm en route. I said I would. Today was a calmer day at the hospital. light pouring in via big windows. While Dad slept, Mom sat next to his bed and held his hand. She glanced up as I entered, her face drawn with fatigue. "You're there. I've been so worried. Why haven't you been answering your phone?" "Sorry," I murmured, averting her gaze. "Had to get Sophie to school. Then got caught up with some job things." Dad's eyes flew open when he spotted me. Something passed across his face. Fear. Before I can figure it out, I regret. Marcus rushed in with bagels and coffee. "Everyone has breakfast." He made the announcement with joy. "Dad may resume eating regular meals today, according to the doctor." I felt as though I was witnessing performers in a play as I watched Marcus, saw my mother stress over the food, and made jokes with my dad about hospital gowns. Was Marcus suspicious? What? If he realized I wasn't actually his complete sister, would he still hate me? Marcus left to answer a business call after breakfast as Mom went to complete some paperwork. When I was finally alone myself with Dad, I took out the letter. "I require answers." Silently, I said, "Actual ones." Dad, who looked older than I had ever seen him, sighed. "Ask me anything. Did you ever try to find him after he sent this?" Dad acknowledged that I had engaged a private investigator around a year after your birth. He had relocated to Europe, which made my heart skip a beat. Specifically France. The PI discovered that he had opened a new legal business in France's Paris. A whole ocean distant. Had he fled from his shame that far? Or did the story have more to it? Have you ever? I took a deep breath. Did you ever feel angry with me because you knew I wasn't yours? Tears filled Dad's eyes. Never. Not even for a second. The day of your birth. You were put in my arms by the nurse. And you put your little hand on my finger. Right then. Biology was irrelevant. I had you. My eyes were wiped. Why tell me now? After all these years? Because secrets eventually find their way out. Softly, he said. Additionally, you have a right to know your own story. But he reached for my hand, Olivia. Please take care of your mother's heart no matter what you do with this knowledge. I nodded, but my thoughts were already racing. France was where Daniel Parker was. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, after putting Sophie to bed, I finally told James everything. He listened without interrupting, holding me as I cried. "What are you going to do?" he asked when I finished. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to forget I ever learned this. Go back to normal life. But I can't. I need to know why. Why he left. Why he never tried to contact me. Why? My voice broke. Why wasn't I enough for him to stay? James held me tighter. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." "We'll figure this out together." Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and walked to my home office, opening my laptop. My cursor hovered over the search bar for a long moment before I typed flights to Paris. The next morning, I came at the hospital early, before everyone else that was up, looking stronger. "I need you to tell me all you remember about that period," I said without preamble. "About Daniel, about Mom, about what happened after Sarah died. Everything." Dad was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak. "It was a difficult time. Your Aunt Sarah's death was sudden. A car accident on a rainy night. Your mother was devastated. They were so close. I had to leave for my father's funeral. 2 days later, I didn't want to go, but he trailed off, lost in recollections. After Sarah passed away, Daniel changed, retracted, furious. When she passed away, he and Sarah were trying for a child. That, I believe, made it more difficult. Ever had any suspicions about him and Mom?" Dad gave a headshake. "Never. Not until the letter arrived. Your mother was so happy when she found out she was pregnant. She thought it was a miracle given how long we've been trying." My throat tightened. "You never tried for another baby after me?" "We did, actually, but it never happened." Now I wonder if he stopped paying, crossing his face. "If you couldn't have children at all," I finished softly. "If that's why Mom never got pregnant until Dad nodded. It doesn't matter now. You were all I ever wanted." I pulled out my phone, showing him the flight itinerary I had been looking at. His eyes widened. "You are going to look for him?" "I have to," I said, "even if it's just to understand why." He was quiet for a long moment. "There's something else you should know. The PI. He found more than just Daniel's location." My heart stopped. "What are you saying? He had another family in France." "A wife?" 2 daughters. About your age. Now. The room spun. Sisters. I had sisters. Does Mom know about any of this? A new voice asked from the doorway. We both turned to see Marcus standing there. His face pale horror washed over me. Marcus? I heard everything, he said quietly. How long have you known? Since last night, I whispered. I was going to tell you, He walked into the room, closing the door behind him. My whole life. I wondered why we looked so different. Everyone always said I was Dad's clone. While you. He shook his head. It makes sense now. Marcus, please. Does it matter? Dad interrupted. Does it change anything about who we are as a family? Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then at me. No, he said finally. It doesn't change who you are to me. Liv. You're my sister. Period. Relief flooded through me as he pulled me into a hug over his shoulder. I saw Dad smiling, tears in his eyes. So, Marcus said as we pulled apart, when are we going to Paris? One blinked. We? You didn't think I'd let you do this alone, did you? Besides, he grinned, I've always wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. Looking at them both, my father, who chose me, and my brother, who didn't care about DNA, I felt stronger. Whatever we found in France, whatever truths were still hidden, we would face them together. But first, we had to deal with Mom. And that conversation would change everything. Telling my mother the truth was the hardest thing I'd ever done. We chose to do it at home. After Dad was discharged from the hospital, Marcus and I had spent days planning how to break the news gently. But when the moment came, all our careful preparations dissolved into tears and trembling hands. Mom sat on her favorite armchair, Dad beside her on the couch, while Marcus and I perched nervously on the ottoman. The letter felt heavy in my pocket, like a time bomb waiting to explode. Catherine, Dad began, his voice steady despite his power. There's something we need to tell you. Something I should have told you 30 years ago. Man's face changed instantly. That sixth sense that mothers have telling her something was terribly wrong. Michael, what is it? I pulled out the letter with shaking hands. Mom, this came for Dad right after I was born. She took it. Confusion evident on her face as she unfolded the paper. I watched her eyes move across the words, saw the exact moment understanding hit her. All the color drained from her face. No, she whispered. No, this can't be, Mom, I said softly, reaching for her hand. She yanked it away. This is a lie, she said, her voice rising. Daniel, how dare you? How dare you suggest the night at Sarah's house? Dad said quietly. When I was away at my father's funeral. Mom stopped breathing. Her hands flew to her mouth as 30-year-old memories crashed over her. Oh, God, she choked out. Oh, God. No. The room fell silent except for her muffled sobs. I wanted to go to her, to hug her, but I didn't know if she'd accept comfort from me now. The living proof of her greatest mistake. Why didn't you tell me? She finally asked Dad, her voice raw. All these years. Because I loved you, he said simply. And I loved Olivia. Nothing else mattered. Mom turned to me, really looking at me, perhaps for the first time. Your eyes, she whispered. I always thought they looked like Sarah's, but they were his, weren't they? I gave a nod, tears falling freely now. Does he know? Did you find him? Not yet, Marcus spoke up, but we know where he is. He's in France, Mom's head snapped up. France. He has another family there, I said softly. 2 daughters, Mom started laughing. A horrible, broken sound that turned into sobs. Of course he does. Of course he built a new life while destroying ours. Mom, he didn't destroy anything, I insisted. Look at us. Look at our family. Our family. She stood up suddenly. Our family is built on lies. Your dad? Michael. He raised another man's child while you watched. Dad asked why you loved her while we raised her together, while we created a happy life. I need air, Mom gasped, heading for the door. I can't. I need to think. We watched her go helpless. Dad started to rise, but Marcus stopped him. Give her time, he said. It's a lot to process. Mom didn't come home that night. She went to her sister Marie's house. leaving us all in a state of suspended animation. The next morning, I got a text from Aunt Marie. She's okay. She just needs time. A week passed. Mom came home, but things were different. She moved through the house like a ghost. Barely speaking, barely eating. She couldn't look at me without crying. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered her in the kitchen one morning. Mom, please talk to me. She turned away, but I grabbed her arm. Mom, I'm still me. I'm still your daughter. Are you? She whispered. How can you be? When everything I thought I knew about you was a lie, the only lie was biology, I said firmly. Everything else, every moment, every memory, every feeling, that was all real. She finally looked at me. Really looked at me. I loved him once, she admitted quietly. Daniel, before he married Sarah. But he chose her, and I chose Michael, and we were happy. Then Sarah died, and everything fell apart. She sank into a chair, and I sat beside her that night. I was so lost in grief, in pain. Daniel was there, and he understood because he was grieving too. It was just one moment of weakness to you. Regret? I asked. Not sure I wanted to know the answer. She reached out, touching my face. How could I regret anything that gave me you? We held each other and cried. 30 years of secrets washing away with our tears. 2 months later, I stood in front of an elegant townhouse in Paris, 16th arrondissement. Marcus stood beside me, holding my hand. We'd hired a private investigator who confirmed that Daniel Parker still lived here with his French wife, Isabel. Ready? Marcus asked. I gave a nod, my heart pounding as I pressed the doorbell. A woman answered, elegant late 50s, with a questioning look away. Is Daniel Parker home? I asked in English. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Who is asking? My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm his daughter. The woman's face went completely white without a word. She turned and walked inside, leaving the door open. We heard rapid French being spoken, then footsteps, and suddenly, there he was, Daniel Parker. My father by birth? He looked older than in the photos, his dark hair now gray. But those eyes. My eyes were exactly the same. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Olivia, he breathed. How? They had a heart attack, I said, my voice steady. He told me the truth, showed me your letter. Daniel gripped the doorframe for support. I never thought. I hope someday. Hoped what? I asked sharply. That I come looking for you. That I'd want to know why my biological father abandoned me before I was even born. Please, he said. Come inside. Let me explain. The next 2 hours were surreal. We sat in his elegant living room while he told his story, how he loved my mother first, but thought she didn't love him back, how he married Sarah, trying to forget Catherine, how Sarah's death, and that one night with my mother destroyed him with guilt. I couldn't stay, he said. I couldn't face Michael knowing what I'd done. Couldn't look at Catherine without remembering, so I ran. Came to France to start over, and never looked back, Marcus asked coldly. Daniel flinched. I looked back every day. I kept track of Olivia from afar. School achievements, graduations. I have a whole file. He disappeared into his study and returned with a thick folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, school photos taken from yearbooks, even a program from my college graduation. You were there? I asked, stunned. He gave a nod. In the back. I left before anyone could see me. Why didn't you ever reach out? Because Michael was a better father than I could ever be, he said simply. He loved you completely, without reservation. I was a coward who ran away. You deserved better than me. And your daughters here? Marcus asked. Did they deserve better too? Daniel's face crumpled. Sophie and Marie don't know about you. Isabel knows she's the only one I've ever told. I spent 30 years trying to make up for my past mistakes by being the best father I could be to them. As if on cue, the front door opened and 2 women about my age walked in, stopping short when they sourced Papa. One of them asked Coy Sandhills. Daniel looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly. What followed was another hour of explanations, tears, and revelations. My half-sisters were shocked but not hostile. They asked questions, share photos, try to bridge 30 years of separation in a single afternoon. Before we left, Daniel pulled me aside. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, he said. But I'd like to be part of your life now, if you'll let me. I looked at him. This man who helped create me then vanished, who loved me from afar but never had the courage to face me, who built a new family while abandoning his old one. I have a father. Silently, I said. A real one, who chose me every day for 30 years. But I took a deep breath. Maybe we can start with coffee sometimes. Get to know each other. His eyes filled with tears as he nodded. The flight home was quiet. Both Marcus and I lost in our thoughts when we landed. Mom and Dad were waiting at the airport. One look at our faces. Told them everything? Did you find what you were looking for? Dad asked as he hugged me. I held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent that meant safety and love and home. Yes, I said. I found out where I came from, but more importantly, I found out where I belong. Mom stepped forward hesitantly. Over the past 2 months, we've begun to heal, to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of truth rather than secrets. And where is that? She asked softly. I looked at them, my mother, who gave me life, my father, who chose to love me, my brother, who stood by me through everything right here, I said with my real family. 6 months later, we all gathered for Christmas. Mom, Dad, now fully recovered, Marcus and his girlfriend James and Sophie, and yes, even Daniel, who flew in from Paris with Sophie and Marie. It was awkward at first, decades of secrets and pain sitting heavily between us. But then Sophie, my beautiful, innocent daughter, climbed into Daniel's lap and asked him to read her a story. And somehow, watching my biological father bond with my child while my real father looked on with a smile, I realized the family isn't about blood or biology or even choice. Sometimes it's about love. It's about forgiveness. It's about the courage to face the truth and the strength to rebuild from its ashes. Dad's heart attack had shattered our family's foundations, bringing 30 years of secrets into the light. But from those broken pieces, we built something new, something stronger, more honest, more real. And in the end, isn't that what family is really about? Story 4. I was facing the full-length mirror. For the 100th time, I smoothed my dress. The terrified, shattered woman I had been a few years prior was nothing like the image looking back at me. Max? He reminded me that if I didn't hurry, we would be late as his voice floated up from downstairs. Honey, are you coming? I returned the call, breathing deeply. It was a big night. It was our first meal together with his mother since we were married. I had only met Marianne once, at the wedding, and I felt like I had been dissected by her intense stare. As I went down the steps, Max's expression brightened. He pulled me in for a kiss and whispered, "You look gorgeous, Leah." I eased myself into his arms, relishing the sensation of security and affection, something that, before to him, I had never really understood. "Thank you," I whispered. "All I can hope for is your mother's approval." Max laughed. "She is not a concern. Once she knows you, she will adore you." I wish I had realized then how mistaken he was. It was a peaceful drive to Marianne's expansive Victorian house. Nerves are making my stomach turn. I saw the immaculately mowed lawn and the shiny Mercedes in the driveway as we drew up. "Are you ready?" Max squeezed my hand and asked. I put on the biggest smile I'll ever have and nodded. Perfectly styled and sporting a strand of pearls that likely cost more than our car, Marianne herself opened the door. As she kissed his cheeks, she crooned, "Maxwell, darling." I cursed as her eyes slid to mine. 10 degrees was the dip in temperature. "It's good to see you again, Leah." I tried not to tremble as I added, "Thank you for having us, Marianne." As she brought us inside, I was astounded by the lavish furnishings. The walls were adorned with family pictures. We are looking down at generations of stern-faced men and women. "Dinner is almost ready." "Marianne," Maxwell said, "how about pouring some wine?" Max was on his way to the bar cart. Marianne looked across at me. With a fake sweetness in her voice, she added, "So, Leah, describe your family to me. What is your dad up to?" I took a deep breath. "He's a construction worker. My mother works as a teacher." Marianne's mouth became thinner. "How charming. How about you?" "What do you do once more?" "I work as a social worker," I said, raising my chin. "I assist families in need." Her laughter was brittle. Someone has to do it, I guess. Unaware of the tension, Max brought our drinks back. What are we discussing? Oh, just learning more about your beautiful wife. Marianne spoke without a grin that extended to her eyes. Dear, did you know that her father works in construction? That is intriguing, isn't it? Max's face flashed with pain, but he immediately covered it up. Mother, Leah's family is amazing. If you met them, you would like them. Marianne, non-committal, huh? So, should we have some food? Marianne asked me a lot of questions about my history throughout supper. They all felt like little jabs. I gave the most courteous response I could, but I was becoming impatient. When can we anticipate having grandkids then? Marianne abruptly put down her fork and asked, My wine suffocated me. I apologize, kids, sweetheart. You two must be preparing to have children soon. You know, Maxwell isn't getting any younger. Max cleared his throat. We've only been married a few months, Mother. That can wait till later. Marianne squinted her eyes. No sense. We must continue to use the Caldwell name. Leah, you do want kids, don't you? With everyone watching me, I felt imprisoned. We still haven't actually talked about it, I succeeded. Well, replied Marianne sternly, you'd better get to it. A lady of your age, fertility is a transient state. Max cautioned Mother, but the harm was already done. My chair scraped the floor as I sprang to my feet. I screamed, Pardon me, and ran to the toilet, splattering cold water in my face. I gazed at my own image. I had gotten myself into what? Compared to the males in my previous sort, Max had seemed so different. Encouraging, affection. But now that I could see his mother's obvious contempt, I questioned whether I had made a grave error. I was surprised by a gentle knock on the door. Leah? Max gave a call. Are you all right? I inhaled deeply, bracing myself. My spouse and I needed to have a serious conversation about our current situation and our true future together. It was a difficult few weeks after that fateful supper with Marianne. Max and I avoided each other like the plague. Every day, the elephant in the room becomes bigger. Max always came up with an excuse to shift the subject or leave the room, even though I knew we needed to communicate. One Sunday afternoon was when it all came to a head. Max's phone buzzed on the bedside table while I was folding laundry. I didn't mean to pry, but the name on the screen chilled me to the bone. Mom. The preview of the message appeared before I could turn away. Have you yet to discuss children with Leah? There is not much time left. I put down the shirt I had been folding, my hands shaking. I yelled, Max, in a sharper tone than I had meant. With a suspicious look on his face, he emerged from the doorway. What's the matter? I gestured to his cell phone. Would you mind telling me why your mother is texting you regarding our plans for reproduction? Max's face went white. He swiftly grabbed the phone and read the message. I can explain, Leah. Do it, please. I crossed my arms as I spoke. Because it appears to me that you and your mother have been talking about our private lives behind my back. I had noticed his nervous habit of running a hand through his hair. That isn't the case. She's just worried, I echoed incredulously, concerned. She's obsessed, Max, and you're giving her the benefit. She has good intentions. He made a feeble protest. All she wants is for us to be content. I let out a sour laugh. Joyful, do you think? Putting pressure on me to become a mother? I'm not ready for will make me happy? Max's expression hardened. And when will you be ready, Leah? We're not getting any younger. Don't you desire a family? His words hit me like a slap. Of course I do, I added gently, but on our terms, not your mother's. My mother has nothing to do with this, Max argued, but I could see the deception in his eyes. Really? Then why is she messaging you about it? Why are you discussing our personal decisions with her at all? Max's jaw tightened. She's family, Leah. She has a right to know. No, I cut him off. She doesn't. It's just the two of us. At least it ought to be. We gazed at one another for a long time, the distance between us becoming larger by the second. At last. Max's voice was low and menacing. My mother could be correct. Perhaps you aren't the best candidate to continue the Caldwell name. I flinched as though he had hit me. What is the intended meaning of that? I'm beginning to question whether I made a mistake by marrying someone so different from us, he added softly. Suffocating and thick. The words hung in the air. My entire universe seemed to be swaying. Before my eyes, everything I believed to be true about my marriage fell apart. Get out, I muttered. Max blinked. What? Leave now, I yelled, and grabbed the closest item, a framed picture of our wedding day, throw it at him. He dodged as it broke against the wall. With you here, I can't have the time I need to think. I briefly believed he may argue. He then grabbed his wallet and keys and gave a curt nod. I'll spend tonight at my mom's, he added. When we've both cooled down, we can chat tomorrow. I fell to the ground, encircled by the remains of our shattered picture frame, as the front door slammed behind him. How could things have gone wrong so fast? More significantly, what was I going to do at this point? When my phone buzzed, I instinctively reached for it. Marianne's text message appeared on the screen. Max explained what had transpired. My darling, you're making a grave error. We'll resolve this when you visit tomorrow. I gazed at the text. A chilly rage is growing inside my chest. No longer being polite. Stop attempting to win over everyone, even if it meant giving up all I believed I want. It was time to defend myself. My fingers trembled as I typed a response. Marianne, don't get involved with my marriage. This is the only caution you have. I knew I had just declared war as I clicked submit, but I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the fight. The weeks after my run-in with Max were a haze of awkward silences and forced civility. Even though we had made an uncomfortable truce, there were still a lot of unspoken words between us. I was aware that we were each anticipating the other person's surprise. At last, it did. Max put down his newspaper with a fake casualness and cleared his throat while I was drinking my coffee on a cool autumn morning. Leah, he said in a deliberately bland tone, I've been contemplating. Perhaps we ought to consult a fertility expert. My coffee almost suffocated me. What? Max leaned forward with serious gaze. We're not growing any younger after all these months. I just believe that we should consider our alternatives. Marianne's unsaid pressure lingered in the atmosphere like a poisonous mist. A harsh clank sounded as I put down my drink. We decided to wait, Max. I'm not prepared. When are you going to be prepared? His tone was tinged with annoyance when he interrupted. Leah, we can't put this off indefinitely. You want a family, don't you? Even though his remarks hurt, I made myself remain composed. I do, of course, but according to our terms. Not your mom's. Max tightened his jaw. It has nothing to do with my mother. It's about us. Our future. I gave a sour laugh. Is it because it seems like it's a way to satisfy Marianne's infatuation with carrying on the Caldwell line? It's unfair. I could see the glimmer of shame in Max's eyes despite his protests. Is it not? I posed a challenge. So why the abrupt urgency? Why are we unable to let things unfold organically? Max's irritation was evident as he ran a hand through his hair. Because time is not a luxury we possess. Look, I've already scheduled a visit with Dr. Reeves. She is the city's top fertility doctor. It seemed as if someone had hit me. What are you? Without even talking to me about it beforehand. Max's voice rose as he replied, I knew you'd react like this. I didn't tell you because of this. Leah, sometimes you need a little encouragement. A shove? With incredulity? I repeated. Max, this isn't a push. A shove off a cliff is what this is. Across the kitchen table, we exchange scowls. It seems like every second that goes by, the gap between us gets wider. I forced my voice to stay calm and finally took a long breath. All right, I'll attend the appointment, I responded. Max's expression brightened. Leah, really? That's fantastic. I silenced him by raising a hand. I'm not done yet. I'll go, but with a requirement. Your mother doesn't participate in this at all. No more talking about our personal lives. No more useful recommendations. It's just the two of us. I agree. Max paused, and I could see the strain on his face. At last, he agreed and nodded. The next week was the scheduled appointment time. I listened to Dr. Reeves describe the series of tests we would have to go through as I sat in her antiseptic office. The sense that I was losing control of my own life persisted. Max, however, was virtually bouncing with excitement. As we left the clinic, I sat silently as he barraged the doctor with enquiries about treatment alternatives and success rates. I felt a wave of nausea. I emptied my stomach before I had even reached a neighboring garbage bin. Leah? Max yelled and hurried up to me. Are you okay? I wiped my lips as an odd serenity descended upon me. I'm all right. I said. I suppose it's just nervousness. However, as Max assisted me to the car and eagerly discussed our next course of action, I came to a realization. The weariness and nausea I've been experiencing recently. Surely it couldn't be? I put a hand to my tummy, feeling both astonished and afraid. Everything was about to change, if I was correct, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared for it. With my heart racing, I glanced to Max as we drew into our driveway. I murmured, hardly raising my voice above a whisper, "We need to talk. I believe I may be expecting a child." We were both excited and nervous on the day of our 20-week scan. Despite living in the same house and tiptoeing around each other like strangers, Max and I had seldom discussed the pregnancy. As we were seated in the waiting area, I could sense waves of stress coming from him. When the technician, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, called her, they were beaming and unaware of the tension between us. I took a seat at the exam table as we followed her into the darkened room. With his hands stuffed deep in his pockets, Max stood clumsily beside me. "Are you prepared to meet your child yet?" With a smile, the technician inquired. As she applied the cold gel to my tummy, I nodded, not believing what I was saying. I extended my hand to grasp Max's, due to habit. After a moment of hesitation, he took it. His hand relaxed uncomfortably. The quick whoosh, whoosh of our baby's heartbeat filled the room. In spite of everything, I started crying. I looked at Max and said, "That's our baby." His gaze stared at the fuzzy image on the television, his expression inscrutable. "Is everything typical?" His voice was strained as he asked. With a nod, the technician ran the wand over my abdomen. "Everything appears to be flawless. Do you want to know the sex?" Max tensed up next to me. We hadn't talked about whether or not we wanted to know, but all of a sudden I had to know. I firmly squeezed Max's hand and murmured, "Yes, we want to know." Grinning, the technician adjusted the picture. "Well done. You are expecting a female child." It seemed like the world was tilting on its axis. A female. My daughter. I experienced an overwhelming wave of affection that left me speechless. Max's hand, however, had become limp in mine. The sight on his face chilled my blood when I turned to face him. Anger and disappointment. Disgust, perhaps. A female. His voice was flat as he repeated. As we were leaving the clinic, the technician swiftly concluded the visit after seeing the change in our attitude. In the vehicle, the stillness between us was deafening. I was at my breaking point. "Talk to me, Max. What's happening?" His knuckles became white as he clamped down on the steering wheel. "I suppose I was expecting for a boy, but it's nothing. Max, this is our daughter, our child. In what way may you feel let down?" He let out a deep sigh. "Leah, you don't get it. Sons have always been the eldest in my family. It's customary, it's anticipated. It seemed as if someone had hit me." "Who is expecting it? Your mum?" Max tightened his jaw. "It has nothing to do with my mother. It has to do with preserving the Caldwell name, the heritage." Silently, I murmured, "Stop the automobile." "What? Stop the car!" I yelled. I struggled to fasten my seatbelt as Max pulled over. Max yelled after me as I staggered out into the pavement, gasping for oxygen. "Where are you going, Leah? I want to confront him." I'm torn between sadness and rage. I hissed at you. "How dare you? How dare you bring your antiquated, sexist expectations into this moment, this miracle? This is Max, our daughter. A part of us both that is alive and breathing. And perhaps you won't see how valuable that is. Perhaps we've made a grave error." Max's face became white. "Leah, that's not what you mean. Come on, let's discuss this when we get home." But I was already shaking my head and moving away. I am unable to return to that residence. Not at this moment. I need time to reflect. Max called out behind me in a panicked voice as I turned and left, but I didn't turn around. On my stomach, where my daughter, my ideal, gorgeous daughter was developing, my palm lay protectively. I was very confident that everything had altered at that particular instant. The life I believed I want. The future Max and I had envisioned. Everything around me was falling apart. And I knew I had to make a decision as soon as the first tears started to flow. One that would impact not just my future, but also that of my daughters. Max kept trying to reach me on my phone, but I ignored it and stayed the night at my parents' place. I was hollowed out by dawn, but I was determined. I have to confront this directly. Max was waiting for me when I got home, his face a mask of remorse and worry. I'm terribly sorry, Leah. It wasn't my intention. I silenced him by raising a hand. We must speak. Not just now, though. Isn't your mother coming over? Max gave a bashful nod. I informed her of the baby. She was determined to attend. I steeled myself, but my stomach constricted. All right, let's finish this up. Without knocking, Marianne came through our front door like a hurricane. With one hand resting on my barely noticeable bulge, she quickly narrowed her eyes as she took in my protective posture. Well, she remarked, with a tone of contempt in her voice. I've heard that congratulations are due. I can't claim, however, that I'm not disappointed. Max seemed tight next to me, but I was surprised when he spoke out. Please, Mother. This is the child we are discussing. Marianne waved him away while keeping her eyes on me. Maxwell, don't be naive. The Caldwell name will never be properly carried on by this girl. You are aware of what must be done. Deathly silence fell over the room. As her words took hold, I felt the blood drain from my cheeks. Marianne, what are you saying? Her voice trailed off to a whisper of conspiracy as she took a step closer. There are solutions to handle this little issue that no one would ever have to know about, such as private clinics. Bile rose in my throat as I flinched back. You're not serious. This is a granddaughter, your grandchild. The word came out of Marianne's mouth like a curse. For our family, what good is that? No. Starting anew is preferable. For a legitimate heir, try again. Desperate for his help, I resorted to Max, but I felt sad for him because of the struggle on his face. I begged Max not to look at me in a whisper. Perhaps we ought to weigh all of our alternatives. Leah. The ground beneath my feet seemed like it was tilting. Wearing the features of my mother-in-law and spouse, I staggered back, separating myself from these strangers. I murmured, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. Get out! Marianne grinned with victory. Let's not rush now, sweetheart. Get out, I replied. I yelled, causing you two to lose your composure. You have no right to enter my house and advise that I kill my kid. Max's face became white as he grabbed for me. Please, Leah, we are only conversing. I recoiled from his contact. We're done talking, Max. Right now, I want you both to leave this house. Outraged, Marianne pulled herself up. Maxwell, you can't talk to us like this. Keep your wife under control. However, Max appeared unable to make up his mind, caught between his mother and me at that very time. Something shattered inside of me. I'll leave if you won't. My voice was unnaturally calm as I spoke. I picked up my keys and pocketbook and headed for the door. Where are you heading? With a hint of terror in his voice, Max yelled for me. At the threshold, I stopped. I put one hand on the doorknob and the other on my tummy. Somewhere secure. Somewhere, no matter what, my kid will be appreciated and cherished. A weird calmness descended upon me as I left them dumbfounded behind and went away. All of a sudden, the choice I had been debating seemed obvious. My hands shaking, I climbed into my car and turned on the ignition as I backed away from the curb. Max was visible to me in the rearview mirror, looking bewildered, standing in the doorway. However, I didn't turn around. I was unable to. I had my eyes on the road. I have to protect myself and my kid in the future. Even if it meant giving up all I believed I desired, I would do whatever it needed to keep her safe. I was crying uncontrollably. I headed into an unknown future. However, one thing was for sure. The world would never be the same. I ignored Max's incessant calls and texts for the following week while I was at my parents' place. While my dad spoke about giving that youngster a lesson, my mom hovered nervously, but I wanted time to gather my thoughts and make plans for what to do next. Max texted me on the 7th day, which was the last straw that got beyond my barriers. Let's chat, Leah, please. Anywhere is a good place to meet. I decided to meet him at a neutral place against my better judgment. The park where our first date took place. Max was pacing and appeared to be sleep-worn and haggard as I got closer to our old favorite bench. Leah. Relief washed across his cheeks as he exhaled. I've been so anxious. I took a seat, avoiding close contact. Max, say what has to be said. He combed through his unkempt hair. I apologize. I really apologize for anything. By allowing my mother to control our lives, I have been a coward. However, I've had time to reflect. And now I know what matters. All that counts is you and our daughter. I wanted to think he was real. How I longed to, God. However, it still hurt to think of his quiet in the face of Marianne's brutality. It's simple, Max, but you failed to defend us when it counted most. His voice broke as he continued, I know, and for the rest of my life, I will regret that. Give me an opportunity to correct it, though, please. I've informed my mother that unless she can accept our family for what it is, she is no longer welcome in our life. My glimmer of hope was swiftly dashed by mistrust. What was her reaction to that? Max's expression grew glum. Not very good. She wrote me out of the will by threatening to cut me off. But none of that matters to me. All that matters to me is you and our child. I got up because I had to get up and think. Max, I'm not sure whether I can trust you. How can I be certain that this isn't simply another effort to appease me? His eyes begged as he grabbed for my hand. Join me at home. Allow me to demonstrate. The locks have been replaced. Blocked the phone of my mother. We have our house back. No more meddling, no more exertion. I allowed him to bring me to his car against my better judgment. There were many whispered statements and unanswered questions throughout the anxious trip home. I was apprehensive as we pulled into our driveway. There was a problem. Max muttered about the new locks as he fumbled with his keys, and then the front door flew open. Marianne stood with a mask of righteous rage on her face. Then she spat. Returning is the wayward daughter-in-law. I spun around on Max. My chest is burning with betrayal. I didn't know, you said. Max objected. His expression was one of genuine amazement. How did you enter here, Mother? Marianne grinned and brandished a key. Naturally, I had a copy produced. Did you truly believe that I could be removed from my son's life with so ease? My palm automatically covered my tummy as I retreated. I'm going. This was an error. Max tightened his hold on my arm. Hold on, Leah. What I wanted was not this, I promise. Marianne moved on, her voice brimming with fictitious worry. Let's not rush now, sweetheart. Here we are all family. What's best for you and the child is all that we care about. Her use of the word child chilled me to the bone. My pulse was racing as I yanked away from Max. Avoid me, you two. I noticed a syringe in Marianne's palm as I turned to run. As realization hit, my blood froze. Control was no longer the only issue. The goal was to completely eradicate the issue. I yelled, fear taking hold of me, Max. Take action. However, Max remained still, caught between his wife and mother, his dilemma immobilizing him once more. I was genuinely alone at that very moment, and I realized it with horrible clarity. I had no one to save me. I would have to take care of myself if I wanted to keep my daughter and myself safe. I pushed past Marianne and ran, my excitement pumping. The only thing on my mind was to leave this nightmare as far away as possible. Max was yelling my name behind me, but I didn't turn around. I was done with second chances this time. I had to save myself now. With my heart racing and my breath coming in short gasps, I staggered inside my parents' house. Mom came running to me. She had a worried expression on her face. Honey, Leah, what took place? I described the horrific situation at Max's residence while crying. With every phrase, my dad's face became darker, and his hands clenched at his sides. That's all, he snarled. I'm going to call the cops. No. I grabbed his arm and sobbed. We are unable to. Not quite yet. I really need assistance. My mother then brought up Paul. Do you recall Paul Hawkins? He is currently a lawyer with a focus on family law. He might be able to assist. I was reminded of something by the name. A kind grin, an unwavering presence from my childhood. Desperate for a lifeline, I nodded. Give him a call, please. Paul showed up in less than an hour. His well-known face was now marked with wrinkles from worry and experience. His businesslike manner softened when he saw me. Gently, he said, Leah, we will fight for you and your kid, even though I'm really sad you're going through this. Paul turned to become my rock throughout the course of the next days. We combed through court filings, assembling a case for a restraining order against Max and Marianne, in addition to a divorce. Paul's unfailing support and calm strength provided me the confidence to take on the challenges that were ahead. One evening, Paul said in a tight, urgent voice, We have to move quickly. Max's relatives are connected. They may attempt to influence the system if we do not take action right away. I nodded, with an unusual combination of resolve and terror. How do we proceed? Leaning forward, Paul's gaze were keen. We launch an offensive. I have proof of Marianne's intimidation, Max's cooperation. We'll submit a protective order application for immediate custody. But he stopped and took my hand, Leah. Are you prepared for the next step? It won't be simple. With a strong sense of protection, I covered my expanding tummy with my other hand. I must be prepared for her. Paul and I were getting ready to head to the courthouse the following morning when my phone buzzed with a message from Max. Please don't do this. For the benefit of our family, we can resolve this. I presented the message to Paul. My hands are trembling. After reading it twice and scowling, he turned to face me. Leah, this may be a trap. We must exercise caution. However, Max's remarks struck a chord with me. A tiny part of me still wished for the family I had imagined to be reunited in spite of everything. I must see him, I said, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. One final chance to meet his gaze and make a definitive decision. Paul's expression grew tense. It's not safe, Leah. Let me take care of this legally. No. I broke off as a startling realization hit me. This is what I have to do for closure, for power. I must confront him according to my conditions. After a long pause, Paul grudgingly nodded. Okay, but I'll accompany you. And this is how we do it. Controlled setting. There are witnesses. I had an odd serenity as we drove to the prearranged meeting spot, a bustling cafe in the middle of town. It was this. That would be the turning point in my life, the future of my daughter. As soon as we walked inside the cafe, I saw Max. As I walked up beside Paul and my partner, he appeared gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed and frantic. Max reached out to me as he stood. Please, Leah. However, the cafe door exploded open before he could continue. Fury twisted Marianne's face as she rushed in. What a sour little jerk you are, she screamed and sprang at me. Time seemed to slow down in that instant. I watched as my father took a protective step in front of me, and Paul moved to stop her. I was frozen in place, though, by Max's response. Torn between his wife and mother, he stood paralyzed once more. And as turmoil exploded all around us, I saw my future exposed by his hesitation. I made up my mind. Don't hesitate any longer. No more second chances. It was time to defend my daughter's right to life, whether Max is with me or not. Chaos broke out at the cafe. Marianne surged at me, her eyes blazing with anger, and her cry sliced through the air. Paul stepped quickly, putting himself between us as my father protectively drew me back. That's sufficient. The room became silent as Paul's voice roared. He turned to face Max, who was still, a mask of doubt covering his face. I'll have your mother arrested for assault if you don't control her. Max grabbed Marianne's arm as he finally jolted out of his daze. Stop it, Mum. You're creating a commotion. Marianne, however, was irrational. She fingered me accusingly as she yanked out of Max's hold. Leah, you'll regret this. You will never see a dime of the Caldwell money. I promise. That, and you are holding that monstrosity. There was silence in the room. Everyone is watching us. Anger and a strong sense of protectiveness for my unborn daughter gave me a burst of power. I took a step forward. I spoke clearly and steadily. I'm only going to say this once, Marianne, so pay close attention. I'm not interested in your money. Neither you nor your family have anything to offer me. What I want is for you to never again be around me or my child. Even as I said the words, my heart was hurting as I turned to Max. I had to say it, I knew. And you, Max. I cherished you. I believed we would be together in the future. However, it's clear to me now that you'll never be able to resist her, to defend us. Max wrinkled his face. Please, Leah, I'm malleable. We can resolve this. No. With every syllable, my resolve became stronger as I interrupted. We are unable to. I refuse to raise my daughter in a household where her gender determines her value and she is viewed as inferior. She is worthy of better. I'm worthy of better. Paul came up and put his reassuring hand on my shoulder. I have a restraining order and a pair of divorce papers here, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. If you don't sign them right now, we'll have to go to court about this. You don't want the specifics of your actions to be made public, I can tell you that. Marianne's face was flushed with rage as she stammered. To my astonishment, though, Max appeared to lose his enthusiasm. For the first time, I noticed a glimmer of comprehension in his eyes as he glanced at me and then at his mother. Enough, he whispered softly, Mother. It's finished. Max received the papers from Paul and signed them with trembling hands. Marianne screamed in disapproval, but Max's glance cut her off. Mother is no longer with us. The moment has come to let go. Max stopped at the door as they were leaving the cafe, giving me one more glance. I apologize, Leah. I wish for you to be happy. Then they vanished. I felt exhausted yet oddly light as the tension in the room subsided. Paul faced me, his eyes brimming with worry and another emotion. I couldn't quite put my finger on. Are you all right? I put a hand on my belly and nodded. We're all right, both of us. I had a wave of calm as we exited the cafe, encircled by Paul and my parents' protective circle. I had optimism for the first time in months, even though the path ahead would not be simple. Paul gave my hand a little squeeze. Leah, you were amazing in there. You are fortunate to be your daughter's mother. I grinned as my eyes pricked with tears. I'm grateful for everything, Paul. Without you, I'm not sure how I would have survived this. He gave me a serious look while speaking in a quiet but confident tone. Leah, you underestimate your strength. You would have figured something out. However, I'm happy I could help you. My daughter kicked me as we entered the sunshine, perhaps confirming my decisions. With a sigh of sheer pleasure and delight, I chuckled. What is it? Paul inquired, grinning at my unexpected laughter. I smiled and said, nothing, only considering the future, our future, and I started to get excited as we drove away, leaving the cafe and everything it stood for behind. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the voyage with my daughter at my side and friends like Paul to support me. Even if the route ahead was unknown, we could face anything. I knew we had prevailed in the battle.